This talk by Peter J. Daniels was delivered before a live audience attending a seminar at the Church of Today.
It's a great delight to be with you here this morning. Rabina and I are really thrilled to be here and to share with you at this place, at this time. I'm sure that to many of you that may seem just an ordinary introduction, but you see, we were in the Philippines recently during the revolution. And from our hotel window, we could hear the rat-tat-tat of the machine guns, and they blew up 4 helicopters at the airport, and we were locked into the Philippines. There were 2 million people on the streets. General Ramos defected with the Minister of Defense. They moved to a corner of the city with around 2,000 troops. President Marcos had sent the tanks to blow them up. As they rattled towards General Ramos, the Minister of Defense, and the troops, they were told in the earphones to fire and to blow them up, but suddenly 200,000 people surrounded the tanks. And whilst they heard the order to fire, they looked out and saw their people, and they couldn't do it, and they got out and went down and stayed with their people. Then President Marcos sent 2 gunships. As they swooped over the officers and soldiers, they were kneeling in prayer. And when they came in for the kill, or for what they thought was the kill, with the rockets ready to fire, one passed over and the other hovered for a little while and threw out a yellow toilet roll to signify they belonged to Cory Aquino. And to be there and watch the television and suddenly see it taken over by the rebel forces, and knowing that we couldn't get out and feeling the unrest, it was an apprehensive time. So when we say we're glad to be here, I warned my wife. I said, she hadn't been to the Philippines before. I said, now look, when you go to the Philippines, there are 10 million people in Manila, all driving in a different direction. We got onto a taxi and we asked him to take us to the Hilton International, and as he moved off, he went straight through a red light. And I looked back at Rabina, and her knuckles were white on the seat. I said, you can't do that. He said, what's the matter? He says, I've been driving taxi 30 years. My brother been driving taxi 30 years. He said, we always go through the red light and straight through a red light again. I almost went into seizure. He kept going and went straight through another red light, and I said, you can't do this. I said, it's dangerous. He said, no, it's not. He said, I've been driving taxi 30 years. My brother been driving taxi 30 years. We always go through the red light. And he went through another one. And then he came to a go light and pulled up abruptly. Nearly sent us through the windscreen. I said, it's okay, you can go through now. He said, no, my brother, he might be coming the other way. I wish you could know how much we love you. Of course, when Jack asked for us to come across here, of course we came. Why not? I didn't know him, but he was an American. And you see, you saved our nation during the 40s. We have an incredible debt to the people of the United States of America. The Japanese had already landed at Darwin. They were already shelling Sydney Harbour. We were doing war drill, and all through the streets there were trenches and sandbags around all the buildings. And as kids at school, we had rubber corks to put in our mouth to chew on and to put in our ears so that when the bombs came, it wouldn't break our teeth or bite our tongue. And we had books on survival of how to live in the hills. And as a young boy, I watched the Australian convoy go past. It was generally an old truck, a car, a few bicycles, and some soldiers. But then the Yanks came. And I sat there as a young boy on the curbside for hours and watched the convoys go past. The GIs were very kind to me. I was a shoe shine boy. One day I was shining the shoes of a black man, and he looked down at me, and when I looked up at him, I saw there was caked blood on his face and around his teeth, and there was skin missing off his chin. I said, mister, you've been in trouble. He said, son, he said, in the United States of America, he said, there's one heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis. He said, here you got one on every street corner. And so we thank you for saving our nation. We would not be a nation today if it was not for the people of the United States of America. The second thing that we thank you for is for sending people like Billy Graham, which changed and challenged our lives and the lives of tens of thousands of people across our nation. If you were to go in any church, in any area in Australia, you would find that there were people there that came to Christ and lives were changed during the Billy Graham crusade. You changed the spiritual complexion of our nation, and we thank you for that. The third thing is that you are the only nation on the face of the earth that produces self-help material. You could go to Britain or Italy or Africa or the Middle East. You will not find a group of people like you coming out on a Saturday to find out something about a new attitude. There is no other nation on the face of the earth that produces books like How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success by Frank Beckter, or W. Clement Stone's A Success System That Never Fails. You are the only nation on the face of the earth that produces that kind of material. So when I tell you we love you, I guess with that qualification, what else could we do? I had to speak at the Possibility Thinkers Luncheon for the Robert Schuller of Ministry. And as they were introducing me, I wrote down a little poem. And God has gifted me. I can do them in about a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And I'd like to share the one I wrote about you. It's just called America. It says, "Oh, America, we love you as we see your flag unfurl. For your promises of justice to a cruel and hostile world. You arrive at every conflict with a strong but gentle heart, always ready to help others, ever first to make the start. All your blessings to the world of enterprise and gifts produce a comradeship that's rare, that encourages and lifts. There are a few who want you down and never more to rise, but let them know in definite terms, be ready for surprise. You are the greatest nation on the earth, a heritage of faith, a land of free and homes of brave who will never quake. So take on notice all the earth, in God we trust for sure, never take our gifts for granted or venture hostile to this shore. United in diversity, with cultures and with skin, your enterprise is always strong, with a firm will to win. In God you trust to guide you as you continue on your way. Oh, America, we love you. What else is there to say? It's true that I failed in every single grade at school. I had 4 fathers and 2 mothers. I came from a family of third-generation welfare recipients. At 26 years of age, I could not articulate words and I was almost illiterate. But I went along to a Billy Graham crusade on May the 25th, 1959, and when I walked into there, I thought all my life I had looked up to everybody and everybody looked down at me. But when I heard the gospel in clear terms for the first time, I suddenly realized that I was equal with all men before God. And I reasoned that if I was equal with all men before God, then I no need to accept inequality with man. I was the son of a king. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are a child of God, then you no need to accept inequality with anybody. You are the son or the daughter of a king, and you can do anything. Well, I'm on the international board of the Robert Schuller Ministry, chairman of the board of directors of Australia Youth for Christ, on the board of directors of the International Board of Youth for Christ, international treasurer covering 103 nations, the only non-American on the international board for the Robert Schuller Ministry, chairman of the board of directors of the Haggai Institute of Advanced Leadership Training in Australia on the international board. I'm on the board for the study of religion and economics. I teach in universities around the world, the highest paid speaker in our nation, but I had a school teacher called Miss Phillips. And Miss Phillips was an old scrubber. She was an old battle axe. She'd make the Rock of Gibraltar look like a cream puff. And she used to get me by the chin, and she used to shake my chin, and she used to rattle my teeth, and she said, "Peter Daniels, you are a bad, bad boy, and you're never going to amount to anything." Well, we've written one book called How to Be Happy Though Rich. It was the fastest and biggest selling Christian book in the history of Australia within 6 weeks. And How to Reach Your Life Goal has now been taken over by our government in our country and put in every prison. And there's 2 other books coming out soon, one called How to Handle a Major Crisis and How to Be Motivated All the Time. But next year there's a very special book coming out. It's called Miss Phillips, You Were Wrong. World economists tell us that there are 5 essentials for any nation to succeed towards the 21st century. They say if you are a nation and you want to succeed towards the 21st century, then you need 5 special elements for success. Well, I suppose if this room was full of psychologists today, then we would argue about every form of psychology. Some would follow Maslow, others would follow Freud, some would follow Alfred Adler. And if we had this room full of economists today, it would be a very similar situation. You would argue about the way in which the economic scene should be run worldwide. But the mainstream economists of the world have come together and agreed that there are 5 essentials for a nation to succeed towards the 21st century. They say the first thing that you need is a rich, modern, highly productive agricultural base. The second element is a rich base of energy-bearing materials. The third is an abundant supply of non-energy-bearing materials. The fourth is an abundant, highly developed technology. And the fifth is a highly educated and sophisticated population. And ladies and gentlemen, of all the nations of the world and all of the emerging nations of the world, there are just 3 nations that have every one of these components going for them. One is Canada, the other is Australia, and the third one, you've guessed it, is the United States of America. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe that inflicts upon us commitment. The position that we're in here today inflicts upon us a compelling desire for excellence. Our position in the economic world scene, I believe, compels us to be responsible. Your opportunity for success has never been greater. The timetable has never been more accurate. The rewards have never been so large and reachable. Opportunity is not knocking at the door. I believe it's literally tearing the door down. Whilst it is true that you can take your hats off to yesteryear, I believe that you need to take your coats off for tomorrow. You see, the bulk knowledge of the world has doubled over the last 10 years. As we look at Bell and Howell, they tell us that something like 80% of their present sales were from products that were not even in existence 5 years ago. And as we contemplate the bulk knowledge of the world doubling over the last 10 years, we've got to project our thoughts and realize it is going to double over the next 10 years. As a matter of fact, in scientific and technological information, it doubles the double every 5.5 years, with 17,000 articles written every day. And as we look in the last 10 years, we look at micro-miniaturization, interstellar communication, computerization, human transplantation, space medicine. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we've been through the industrial age, the automotive age, the jet age, the space age, the electronic age, and many believe that today we're in the age of the cortex and that the human mind is on the periphery of its greatness. It is the last great unconquered area of mankind. Now, I believe, is the time to cut the fetters from our mind and allow it to glide as it was divinely designed to do so. But we live in a changing world. The military components are different. The economies are different. The monetary system is different. The world has shrunk to the size of a golf ball with international travel. Even the geography is different. Our life expectations is different. Our markets are different. We look today at General Motors' new J model. It's assembled in the United States, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and South Africa. We look at Ford's new World car, the Escort, is being put together in the United States and Great Britain and Germany from parts made in Spain, Italy, Britain, Japan, and Brazil. Many of you would have a Japanese handheld calculator, and when it came upon the scene years ago, I marveled at how much they could get in such a small package. But today we have them in the size of credit cards. We still call them Japanese handheld calculators. But it's interesting to me that the electronic chips come from Silicon Valley in the United States. They're assembled in Singapore, Indonesia, or Nigeria, and the steel housing comes from India, and the Made in Japan label is stuck on the calculator when it arrives in Yokohama, Japan. The world is indeed changing. Frank Goebel said in his book Excellence in Leadership, he said the mind's ability to tune or filter information in or out is very similar to the functions of a radio. He said the radio antennae is receiving messages from many different stations, but the operator eliminates all but one station at a time by means of a tuning device. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to stand sentinel at the gate of our mind and challenge thoughts as they come in and dismiss thoughts we do not want. E.F. Shoemaker, the great economist, says, economics does not start with goods. It starts with people, their education, organization, and discipline. And without these three, all resources remain latent, untapped potential, like the marvelous, unlimited resources of Brazil. Or we here in our country, that South America looks to North America and says, we are poor because you are rich. They don't read their history books. You see, at the turn of the century, you had about the same size population as South America. But you instituted three very important things: democracy, the free enterprise system, and birth control. And today you're rich and have about 240 million people. They are poor and have 386 million, and they haven't done any of those three things yet. Yet they have more minerals, better coastal waters, and better soil for agriculture. J.P. Morgan understood the human potential, probably the greatest industrialist that ever lived. He said, I will pay more for the person with the ability to handle people than any other purchasable commodity under heaven. You see, we're in the people business, you and I. And when we think about being in the people business, we've got to come right back and look at ourselves. You need to understand that you are responsible for you. And there are so many people, as I move around this great world that we live in, that even want to work for God in an advisory capacity. But you are responsible for you. And if the gospel teaches anything at all, it teaches that one day you will stand alone and you will be accountable. Personal accountability. Dr. Alfred Adler, the great Austrian psychiatrist, spoke about what he called the life lie of the neurotic. The life lie of the neurotic. He said it is a categorical demand of the patient's lifespan that he or she should fail through the guilt of others and thus be free from responsibility. Am I ringing any bells out there? Are you an excusiologist? You see, what he said was the life lie of the neurotic. He said it is a categorical demand of the patient's lifespan that he or she should fail by blaming someone else and thus be free from responsibility. Psychologist Hans Einzek analyzed 19 reports covering 7,000 psychiatric cases, and he found a rate of cure or improvement with help, that is, with psychiatric help, of 64%. He compared that to a spontaneous recovery rate, that is, a rate of recovery for individuals who receive no therapy at all. That was 66%. It seems to us that some of our psychiatrists are driving us crazy. A Canadian psychiatrist, Dr. Raymond Price, spent 17 months studying Nigerian witch doctors, and his conclusion was that their therapeutic results were about equal to those obtained in the North American clinics and hospitals. But let me bring it down to earth, if you will, and tell you about a man who had a difficult childhood. He had less than 1 year's formal schooling. He failed in business at 31. He was defeated for the legislature at 32. He again failed in business at 33. He was elected to the legislature at 34. His fiancée died when he was 35. He was defeated for a speaker at 38. He was defeated for an elector at 40. He married a wife, and if history is correct, at 42, she was a burden to him. Some of you may relate to that. Only 4 of his sons lived past the age of 18. He was defeated for Congress of 43. He was elected to Congress of 46. He was defeated for Congress of 48. He was defeated for the Senate of 55. He was defeated for Vice President of 56. He was defeated for the Senate of 58. His name is Abraham Lincoln, so what's your problem? Are you an excusiologist? Are you just looking for some opportunity to cop out of a commitment and to fail gracefully? And for those of you that feel that you're too old, too young, or have some mental or physical handicaps that prevent you from success, let me hasten to remind you that at 100 years of age, Grandma Moses was still painting. That at 94, Bertrand Russell was active in national peace drives. That at 91, Rubinstein gave one of his greatest recitals in New York's Carnegie Hall. That at 89, Albert Schweitzer was head of hospitals in Africa. That at 88, Konrad Adenauer was Chancellor of Germany. That at 82, Sir Winston Churchill wrote the history of the English-speaking people. That at 46 years of age, Beethoven became totally deaf and he wrote his greatest music during those latter years. That there is a man here called Henry V. Bliss Carney Jr. in this country, who was born without legs. He is president of the Human Resource Center and founder of Abilities Incorporated with 13 honorary degrees and 9 books to his credit. So again, I ask you the question, what's your problem? Ladies and gentlemen, you live in the greatest nation on the face of the earth. If you can't succeed here, when will you succeed? Don't be an excusiologist. You see, one of the things we need to recognize is that you can't measure guts. And very often it takes some courage to push forward. Failure may bring you back to reality, but I've got some good news for you. Success soothes all memories. In coming to grips with yourself, you must understand and apply certain principles if you want to succeed. William James, a great psychologist and behavioral scientist of the 20s, said the greatest discovery of my generation is you can change your life by changing your attitude. Edison said greatness is an ordinary man with an extraordinary attitude. Robert Letourneau, the king of earth-moving equipment, had a young pastor with him called John Haggai. And he said to this young pastor, John, life is attitude. He said, if there was no money in Fort Knox, he said, nobody knew that there was no money in Fort Knox. He said, the business of America would keep on going in the same old way. He said, but if all the money was in Fort Knox and a believable leak got out that it had gone, he said, business would collapse overnight. He said, so John, watch your attitude. Watch your attitude. I wish you could be with me when I go to the office of a morning. You'd hear me say 100 times, do it now, do it now. I was with Clem Stone just the other night in his home, and I guess he is the person that really coined that phrase, do it now, do it now. I suppose that if I was to give you one simple tool for success, if you forgot everything else I said this day, it would be mastery over procrastination. You know, so many of us are raring to go and we can't go for raring. I mean, we're really waiting for that boat to come in and we never sent one out. You know, we're procrastinating all the time. I often wonder if Rabina, my wife, really listened to my lectures. She's been following me around the world faithfully for many years, until we were in Perth one day. That's in Western Australia, and our oldest son was getting married some years ago. We agreed that she would buy a new dress. And we agreed on the amount. And I had to go off and lecture somewhere, and I left her alone, as I often do. I came back from lecturing and I walked into the hotel and there was 2 big boxes on the bed. I said, hey, I thought we had a bit of an agreement here. She said, well, there's a story about that. There's always a story. And I said, okay, what happened? She said, I went down to Hay Street and I saw this beautiful dress in the window and I knew it would be perfect for the wedding. I went in and tried it on and it fitted and everything was fine and I was finished by 10 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't spend any time with you. You were out throwing yourself off the platform somewhere around town. What am I supposed to do? So I caught a bus and went to Fremantle to have a look at the dockyards and some of the historic areas of Perth. She said, and I suddenly found myself in a shopping centre. And as I walked through there, I could hear music coming out of the amplification system. She said, and then I found myself in front of a dress shop. And when I looked into the window of that dress shop, I saw this magnificent creation. I knew I'd already bought a dress, but when I saw this dress, I wondered whether you'd want me to have it. And the music was coming through from the amplification system, and suddenly I thought I heard your voice. And it said, mastery over procrastination, do it now, and I did. It is the single most important tool for success. The second principle is enthusiasm. It comes from 2 Greek words meaning entheo, the God within, that which is literally pushing you forward. Enthusiasm. I have a sign in my office that says either get enthusiastic within 10 seconds or get out. It is the outflowing of a pleasing personality and a contagious enjoyment for what you're doing. And it can be developed. But so many of us are like the man that stood in front of the fireplace and said, give us some heat and then I'll put some wood on. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastic, and you'll find that people will gravitate towards you, because there are a lot of lonely people out there. A lot of people that need encouragement. And if you are enthusiastic, they will gravitate towards you like bees around a honey pot. And you'll find that you'll be successful because people like to deal with enthusiastic people. The third thing is develop habit force. Your inner feelings are reflected to your outer action. Man is a creature of habit. I can remember some 10 or more years ago, we had a beautiful home up in the hills, and I was a busy executive. I would come home and I would leave my coat over a chair and my tie across the couch and my shoes on the floor. And I mean, when I went through the house, it looked like a nuclear fallout center. But I was a busy executive. And suddenly I realized that all my life my wife had picked up after me. And so I got her and I sat her on a chair. I didn't want her to go into cardiac arrest. And I looked in her blue eyes and said, "Sweetie, all of my life you had picked up after me. I want to tell you that never, for the rest of our lives, will you ever pick up after me again. I'm going to change that habit." Why do I tell you that? I tell you that because she's here and you can check up on it. I can remember one time I left my pajama pants on the floor in the bathroom, and our office was half to 3/4 an hour from where we lived, and I was just about to walk in the office and I suddenly remembered I left it on the floor of the bathroom, and I drove all the way back there just to shift them. Why? Because I understand that if you want to change your habits, you must never let an exception occur, because if you allow an exception to occur, you tell your subconscious mind that you were not serious, and when you're in a desperate situation and you want to send a signal to your mind, it will just laugh at you because you've never been serious before. You can change your habits. You can change your life by changing your habit. Man is a creature of habit. Change your life. Change your habits. And if you want to be successful with it, never, ever, ever, ever let an exception occur. The fourth thing is develop a positive mental attitude. Orland, the man that developed the Instamatic camera, said, "Whenever I get a great idea, all I need is one negative comment to destroy a good idea." And so I incubate myself from negative thinking people. A positive mental attitude means spending your creative energies on finding out ways things can be done, rather than exhausting your emotional and mental powers dwelling on the way things cannot be done. It means turning a problem into a solution. It means that you must develop what I call thought displacement. Let me give you 5 simple ways to develop a positive mental attitude. 1, develop the ability to say yes. So often when we're involved with people, the first reaction we have is to say no to whatever they're asking us to do or to be involved in. The second thing is develop a strong drive, a top capacity for work, the ability to break down barriers. The third thing is a steady persistence, a determination, the will never to quit, and to keep trying when others give up. The fourth is a mature personality, reliability, realistic thinking, the ability to take hard knocks, good judgment and self-control. The fifth is a marked aptitude for getting on with other people. You cannot think 2 things at once, ladies and gentlemen, so you replace a negative thought with a positive thought. Affirm the affirmative. Stand sentinel at the gate of your mind. So many people start out on the road to success and pay a down payment by way of a verbal commitment. Well, they say, "I want to be successful," and they give that verbal commitment. "I'm going to try hard. I'm going to do my best." But they default in their periodical and final payments. Ladies and gentlemen, success is a price. It is a payment, if you will. An exchange of sacrificial commitment and personal discipline in mental, physical and time output. And so many honest and dedicated people with character and intelligence that I've met around the world would never lie or welsh on a commitment to anyone else, but continually, habitually, persistently adopt what I call a pseudo-rationalization to themselves and cop out of a commitment by way of pseudo-rationale and welsh on themselves, thereby pushing themselves lower in their own esteem, and at the same time they are within the subconscious strengthening the chains that already bind. Paying the full price means a commitment to excellence and learning how to excel in dimensions that we've never known before in our lives. I was on television in Perth not very long ago, and they must have read some advanced material. And they said, "Mr. Daniels, is it really, really true that you only own 1 pair of dress shoes?" I said, "Yes." I have a pair for running and a pair for horse riding, but I only own one pair of dress shoes. They said, as we understand it, you could buy many more shoes than that. Why do you only have one pair of shoes? I said, well, that's quite obvious. I've only got one pair of feet. They said, but you've got a gold Rolls Royce. I said, yes, but I've only got one of them. They said, but could you give us a definition for success? I said, yes, the willingness to bear pain. I didn't say be a pain, ladies and gentlemen. I said bear pain. And what we generally want to do is stay in the comfort zone. And in that first book I wrote, How to Be Happy Though Rich, one of the problems is that whenever we think of wealth, we always think of someone that has more. Because you see, from that posture we can philosophize and we can criticize and we can fantasize. But the biblical injunction is to look for someone that has less, because when we look down at someone that has less, it means we have an obligation and we have to participate in helping that person up. And when I talk about how to be happy though rich, everybody in this room is filthy rich, even if you're on unemployment benefits, because you see, a person in Bangladesh would swap places with you immediately and give 90% of it away. You see, whenever we think of wealth, we must think of someone who has less rather than someone that has more. In our country, for 3 generations, we've told the Christians in our country that money is wrong, ambition is wrong, drive is wrong. And we really didn't say it was wrong. What we said was that we weren't quite sure. And that's a very difficult posture to argue from, because they really haven't said anything in the positive. But if you follow that philosophy, and if there are some here today that follow that philosophy, let me say that's a very comfortable way to live, because you never have to perform. And if you don't perform, you don't earn. If you don't earn, you don't get. And if you don't get, you don't give. It's a master stroke of satanic genius. And after all, you only get to keep that which you give. And so success is the willingness to bear pain. It means you've got to step out of the comfort zone. It means that if you're an athlete and you want to win, you get to the point where the pain is almost unbearable, and then suddenly you get a second wind and a third wind and a fourth wind, and you press on. But whatever field you're in, whatever industry you belong to, whatever ambitions you have, know your stuff. Know it inside and out. Saturate yourself with it. There is nothing that will put a spring of confidence in your walk and in your performance like being sure that you definitely, concretely, and specifically know what you're doing. Frank Goebel, in his book Excellence in Leadership, says you know very little until you do it in a real life situation. Wesley, that great old-time preacher and the founder of Methodist Church, said, either read or get out of the ministry. And I'm saying to you here this morning in this place, either read or get out of the success race. I've read 1,600 autobiographies and plotted the strengths and weaknesses of every single person. I read military history, philosophy, economics, theology, military history. I have 78 new books to read when I get back home in Adelaide. I read 5 books at a time, all the time. Why do I do that? Because the mind is like a muscle. It can be developed. And when Miss Phillips told me that I'd never ever amount to anything, she forgot the God factor. And she forgot that God had implanted in every person the ability to grow. And if I was to get down here and do press-ups, I think I would beat most people here because I'm used to doing it. My muscles are in tune and in tone with that. And the mind is like a muscle. It can be developed. And as you read and as you stimulate your thought process, remember that it's like a tank with a slow leak. You've got to keep topping it up all the time. And you should be reading continually. I hope that today that bookshop out there is sold out. Because if you're not prepared to read, learn to fail gracefully. If you haven't learned to read, fail gracefully.